The first time I ever walked into a classroom and I was the teacher was in January of 1994. At the time, I had a full head of hair. As a matter of fact, it was down to here. And I was only a few months older than some of my students. And they were only paying me graduate student pay, which was not very much. So I used to teach in a t-shirt and jeans. If it was hot, sometimes I'd show up and teach in shorts. So I looked like my students. On that first day of class, I decided I need to demonstrate that I'm the teacher and I'm the authority, and I made up my mind I was going to do it non-verbally. So I marched into that classroom and I threw my books down on the desk in front and I said, "This is Speech 108. And someone sitting right there said, "No, this is Math 334. And there was a professor at the board writing problems, and I'd walked into the wrong room. Now, I made it out to the hallway without dying of embarrassment, and I said to myself, this is going to make a great story. And so I went and found the correct classroom where my students were wondering why I was late, and I walked in and I told them what I had just done, and it broke the ice, and they actually got along a little better with me than I had thought they might. But I tell that story for a couple of reasons. First of all, this is Analysis of International Society B, Nonverbal Communication. Sometimes on the first day of class, people accidentally go to the wrong room. If you've come to the wrong room, you can leave now. You're going to have more dignity than I had that day. The other thing is to make the point, in college, whether it's this class or something else that you're doing, things are going to go wrong. And it's embarrassing when it happens. But if you just bear down and get through that first feeling of embarrassment, it winds up making a great story, and you can help other people with it. So, for most of the past 28 years, I've taught interpersonal communication. And back when I started in the 1990s, I would tell people that's what I teach, interpersonal communication, and they would kind of smirk. They would sometimes laugh, and they would say, "You mean people take college classes to study that? Don't you learn that just by being alive?" More recently, fewer people say that. More recently, more people are understanding it's kind of hard, bordering on scary, to talk to other people, especially if you don't know them well. Jean Twenge at San Diego State University she published a book about 10 years ago about iGen, the internet generation, which she says you are. iGen begins with people born in 1995, so unless anyone here is more than 27 years old, which I don't think, and it ends with people born in 2012. So unless any of you are younger than 10 years old, which I don't think, you're all part of iGen. What the data tell us is that the mental health of people in that generation looks sharply different from the generation before it. That there are more reports of depression and anxiety, more reports of self-harm, people get a lot less sleep, and people take longer and longer in their late teens and early to mid-20s to become fully independent and ready to take on the responsibilities of adulthood. And so she went looking for what could it be that is making this change between iGen and the generation before. 2012 is an important tipping point, an important inflection point in these numbers for these mental health conditions. And what happened in 2012? That was the first year that more than 50% of the population owned a smartphone. 2 years later, a researcher named Yalda Uls at the University of California, Los Angeles, set up this unbelievably cool study that I can explain to you in about 3 sentences. And the results of that study blew my mind when I first read them, and that you may find them a little bit startling. In her town, there was a nature camp. And the nature camp only ran for a week, but it ran all summer long. There were just multiple sessions. So if you sent your kid would stay a week. The next week, other kids would go. The week after that, other kids would go. So the study she ran on Sunday, before the kids left for the nature camp, she would give them a test, a standard psychological instrument, show them faces, and ask them, what emotion is this face showing? And she would score it. Then, at the nature camp for the whole week, they were not allowed to have their phone at all. They didn't use anything with a screen. No tablets, no laptops, nothing. And then, on Saturday, when they came back from camp, she had them take the test again. And at the end of the week, with 1 week away from their phones, their ability to recognize emotion in people's faces had shot up. One of the really methodologically clever things that she did, she also, each week, would have some of the students who were going to camp in future weeks also take the test on Sunday and on Saturday, and they became the control group. Good morning. Please get comfortable. She would have them take it on Sunday and Saturday, and they became the control group because during the week, they'd had their phones the whole time. And during all that time with their phone, their score did not improve. On Sunday, they had kind of a weak score recognizing emotion, and on Saturday, the same weak score. 1 week away from digital devices, and kids about 10 years old, 10 to about 12 was the age bracket, their ability to recognize emotion in another person's face grew substantially. Now, I tell you that story at the beginning of the first class meeting to get you used to the fact that this class about nonverbal communication, it's based on social science. Reading people's facial expressions and understanding what emotion they're feeling, that's a primary channel of nonverbal communication. We will have an entire class meeting where we survey not only some of the specific research findings, but entire theories about what facial expressions mean. And there is a raging controversy. And the researchers who believe the different theories don't like one another and actively insult one another. So it can be very entertaining to try to sort out what do facial expressions mean. But that is going to be what this class is made of, social science. Now, not everything that we're going to talk about for the entire duration of the class will be social science. You have probably learned some lessons about how to communicate effectively from your parents, from your friends, maybe from bosses, mentors, the occasional teacher. And I would call that folk wisdom. Folk wisdom. And folk wisdom can be very powerful and it can be very reliable. The only thing I'm saying is there is social science on one hand, and social science is about collecting data carefully to test a hypothesis, reporting your results, and then opening everything up to peer review. There's social science, we will focus on that. Then there's folk wisdom, things you learn from the people around you. Sometimes we'll talk about that. But there's a third category. Social science, folk wisdom. The third category, incidentally, one thing you'll get used to, I sometimes get to talking and I get so much momentum that I forget about my visual aids. So when I was talking before about phones, this was going to be my visual aid about people with phones. And I now realize come on in. I now realize I probably should mess with the lights and figure out how to kill these lights because that's almost impossible to see. Hold on 2 seconds because, I like that. And this was going to be my visual for kids going to camp. That brings us, there's social science, there's folk wisdom. The third category, this is an idiom in the United States. It's a use of English that's recognizable to people who grow up in the culture. The third category I call hogwash. Now, hogwash is a word that means a statement or idea that's really ridiculous. When you call something hogwash, you are deliberately being insulting. A little bit playful, but insulting. Let me explain to you what I mean when I call something hogwash, because I'm going to use that word a lot. There are people, some of them from the field of communication like me, more of them from the field of psychology. They have graduate degrees and they want to make money. So they write books And they say a lot of things in the books that are not true, and they know they're not true, but they sound really cool, and they have a PhD, so they publish the book, and people buy the book, and they make money. And there's a lot of it, and my name for that is Hogwash. Let me give you a couple of examples. You may have heard 93% of all communication is nonverbal. Pure hogwash. If you haven't heard it, you will. That particular soundbite circulates a lot. You may have heard, if someone won't look you in the eye, it means they're not telling you the truth. Hogwash. You may have heard, if someone touches their face, or if someone crosses their arms, you can tell that they're lying. What the research actually says, when conducted carefully, human beings are terrible, 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 terrible at knowing when people are lying. And we are going to spend an entire day on what the research says about whether you can detect lies in another person. The question is complicated, but a big part of what I want to have happen in this class by the end is I want, for the rest of your life, when someone says something about nonverbal communication and it's really simple and really cool, I want you to stop everything and say, what study did they do? What was the size of the sample? What was the method? That doesn't sound quite right. And if what you hear is, well, it was someone who's an expert and they wrote a book, your response should be, yeah, they wrote a book. And there in your mind should be, probably hogwash. All right. So that is my opening salvo about nonverbal communication. So what I have now, I have an informal, low-stakes, not graded homework assignment. Here's what I would like. As of today, you are all just faces, and I want to be able to connect some information to the names on my roster, and eventually to use that to start connecting names with faces. This is my email address. I would love it if, let's say, between now and Monday, you would send me an email and put 2 things in the email and a third if you want to. First of all, a picture of you that you like and you think looks like you. So choose a picture that you think, when you look at it, you think, yeah, that looks like me. I'm not going to share the picture with anybody. I'm not going to post it anywhere. I am going to use those pictures to try to put faces with names. The second thing I'd like you to put in that email is your name and what you would like me to call you. And then the third thing, which is optional. If you can think of something that fits this third thing, go ahead and do it. Something here, locally, that you enjoy and that you wish more people knew about and appreciated. Something that you like. You probably can tell I'm not from Japan. I'm from the United States. I'm here on a Fulbright grant for 1 year. I've only been in Japan since September 6th. And a lot of people, when they find out that I'm new and that I'm not here for very long, they'll try to figure out things they think I would like and make recommendations. And believe it or not, what I would rather people do is not try to guess what I would like, but instead tell me what they would like. The things that they enjoy. Because I didn't come here to have more of what I've had in the past. I came here to make new discoveries. And when someone shows me something that they really like, very often that liking is contagious. It could be a restaurant, it could be a place to go hike, it could be a hobby that you do here, anything specific to here. The one detail you might add to it is something that I'm not likely to be able to find when I return to the United States. So, a picture of you, your name and what you like to be called, and something here that you really love and you recommend. So now I'm going to tell you about the moving parts of this class. I'm going to be very candid and frank with you and say, at my college back in the United States, which I'll introduce myself, you'll hear more about my college in a few minutes. There, honestly, I'm known as one of the hardest professors on campus. A few years ago, they had a game show night, and we played Family Feud, and one of the questions was, who's the hardest professor? And I was the number one answer by double the margin of the second hardest professor on campus. Now, I'm brand new to this campus. I've never taught students here, never taught any of you, don't know how this university runs, and so a minute ago when I said I was hard, I bet a lot of you thought, oh no. But I want to turn that upside down because I am new and don't know this campus and don't know you, I am going out of my way to actually make this class very easy. Easy in the sense that I am going to come in every week and I'm going to walk you through what nonverbal communication scholarship says. And then I have a couple of assignments, none of which are particularly rigorous, and I don't plan to grade them as such. Let me talk about those assignments. First of all, in a few weeks, after people have had time to add the class and drop the class and the roster is stable, what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomly pair you up into partnerships, 2 people. You and your partner will then be assigned to go someplace where you can watch a lot of people interacting. It could be the train station. It could be a sporting event. The 2 of you will decide where you want to go. And here's your assignment. You're going to watch people, and you're going to watch for the nonverbal cues we have been talking about in class. When you see one, you'll elbow your partner and say, look over there. The 2 of you will try to guess what that nonverbal is saying. And every time you disagree, maybe you see a young man and a young woman hug, and one of you says, that's a brother and sister, and the other one says, no, they're dating. Every time you disagree about the nonverbal, make a note of it. Because the assignment is to come back from your people watching, and you're going to write up 3 nonverbals that the 2 of you interpreted differently, and why each of you thought it was what it was. Well, I thought that it was a brother and sister. Here's why. They looked a lot alike. My partner thought that they were dating, and here are the reasons why. You write up your 3 observations that the 2 of you interpreted differently, and that's the assignment. The learning will happen in the experience. It's not the kind of thing I'm going to pick apart. I'm not going to grade it for spelling or grammar, none of that. The second assignment, the name of it is the article report. The article report. What I have done, I've collected, I think there are 30 of them, 30 peer-reviewed, published studies in nonverbal communication that I thought, when I saw them, you would find interesting. And I looked at how complicated was the method, how hard is it to understand what they did, and for each of the 30, it seemed like a college student can probably figure this out. And what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to put you in partnerships. So 2 of you will talk to each other and pick which study the 2 of you want to do. And you'll sign up for it. You will then read the study, each of you. You'll talk to each other about what it says. If you are confused, if there are parts of it you don't understand, that's what I'm here for. I'm going to do office hours here in the morning and in the middle of the day. You can send me emails. We can get on Zoom. If you are having a hard time understanding the study, I'll help you until you do understand it. Then, you and your partner together are going to deliver an oral report on the study as a video. You will put that video where we can see it. Could be YouTube, could be one of the other video sites. If you really know Moodle well, you could put the video straight into Moodle. And then, each partnership will be assigned one other partnership. So, if the two of you are partners and the two of you are partners, you might post your article report, you might be assigned to watch their article report, and then post a video of you asking a question. Now, the question should be one that was prompted by curiosity, and it should be a probing question. When the article report, when you make that video, you want to make sure you both talk, that you tag in and out. That's one of the ways that I'm going to gauge whether you understood what you read, or whether one person did all the work. When you make the video of the question, one of you might say, as we watched your report, we got curious about this, 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 and this, and here's why we were curious. And then the other one can say, so here's our question. And the kind of question I have in mind might go on for a couple of sentences. It might have a little setup and a little backstory. So, article report, you pick an article, you read the article, you talk about the article, you video your oral report, then you watch one other videoed oral report, you prepare your question-asking video, you post it. Again, because it's a video, no spelling or grammar, I'm not going to dissect these things. They're not likely to have wrong answers. If you read the study and you understood what happened and you report on it, you're going to get most or all of the credit. So you're going to come to class every Thursday. We will take a different topic in nonverbal communication. And when we've got to the point where we've been through a lot of them, you'll go out and people watch, you'll pick an article, and you'll report on it. There is no final exam in here of any kind. There is no exam in here of any kind. I do give exams, but I give exams when I know the campus and when I know the student population so I can finely tune them to what people are able to do. And I know nothing about you. So I'm going to come in with the content and some fairly loose assignments that let you talk back to me so we can see if you're understanding what I'm talking about. Now, I'm going to pause for a second. I would love it if you wanted to ask me questions. Yes, ma'am.
Why did you choose this field?
Why? Oh, I've got a good story for that one. A true story. So, when I was a young child, I was not athletic at all. And just about all of my friends, they were both athletic and competitive. I was competitive, but not athletic. When I was 12 years old, the school I attended had a debate team. And I joined the debate team. And I got to be competitive, even though I wasn't athletic. All the way through high school and into college, the biggest thing in my life was the debate team. I went to Baylor University in the United States, joined the debate team. The debate team was housed in the Communication Studies Department, and the secretary in the department could sign my advising slip when I needed to sign up for classes, so I didn't have to go stand in line at the advising center. Now, one day, I handed her my advising slip, needed to sign up for classes. She got her pen out, but then she put it down and pushed it back at me. And I said, "What's the problem?" And she said, "You're a junior now. I can only sign that for juniors if they're communication majors." That's how I became a communication major. And if that sounds to you like a dumb reason to choose a major, I agree. But it turned out to be a really, really wonderful field. One that I really, really enjoy. And I'm about to get into talking about some of the misconceptions that you might have when you hear about me. And if you're right now at the point in life, if you're not sure what you want to do, even what you want to study, and that's causing you stress, it's actually very, very normal. The Jean Twenge research I cited about 10, 15 minutes ago, she said people are getting confident with what they want to do with their life and even what they want to major in college later and later, which is a way of saying it's not just you. And it's par for the course, and it will be okay if you just do your best. That question I loved. I do want to say, out of the construction of the class, the assignments, is there anything where I kind of blew through it and you would like to know the details? And it's okay if they're not, and it's okay if you think about it later on and you want to raise your hand. But I'm going to pause and see if there are. Okay. Let me tell you a little about me. My name is Doyo Schrader, and I would like for you to call me Doyo. You saw my email address, and the way that's pronounced, people typically who have that for a first or last name, they pronounce it Doyle. I've been called a lot of things in my life. You are about to learn that I grew up in Texas. Nobody in Texas pronounces Doyle correctly, and I'm not exaggerating. I've been living in Texas most of my life, and they talk like this. So when they don't say Doyle, they say Dowell. And actually, small children who try to say Doyle, it almost always comes out Doyo. And through my church and other involvements, I'm around little kids kind of a lot. And so I get called Doyo a lot. And for some people in Japan, L's and R's are very difficult. So I made a decision coming over here that for this year, I would prefer that you call me Doyo. Now, some of you may be superb speakers of English and could handle the L with no problem. But if some people call me Doyle and some people call me Doyo, then it becomes a who's good and who's bad contest. So what I would prefer is everybody just call me Doyo. I live in Oregon. I teach at Bushnell University. Bushnell University is in Eugene, Oregon, which is where the University of Oregon is. We are a little bitty Christian liberal arts college right across the street from the University of Oregon. And there are 3 things I want to explain about me. And with each of them, I'm going to talk about some misunderstandings you might have, and then I'm going to try to clear them up so you understand them properly. The first thing, I am an American college professor. And you might think that that means I believe I have all the answers. But I've already tipped my hand on this because you know that from the time I was 12 and into college, that I was fascinated by debate. And the things that people debate, the things chosen for debate topics, typically don't have right answers. There are strong arguments on both sides. What I did not mention when telling that story is I went on to graduate with my degree in communication studies, got a master's in communication, and then got my doctorate in argumentation because I wanted to be a debate coach. And off I went to Arizona State University, which had a debate team with over 30 people on it. It had a 6-digit budget. We traveled internationally to compete, and I was their head debate coach for 2 years, and then realized I'd made a terrible mistake and changed career. So what I said before about you not being sure what you want to do with your life, this is my second career. I already abandoned my first one. People do. But all of that to say, we're going to get into some controversies in this class. We've already mentioned, what do facial expressions mean? We've already mentioned, can people detect when other people are lying by watching their nonverbals? There will be others where I will say, this is one position and the data supporting it. This is the other position and the explanation supporting it. A lot of times, I'm not going to have the right answer because we don't necessarily have a complete answer yet. Second misunderstanding. You might think that I was always a good student, that I always did the good student things and always had high grades. Actually, I graduated in the bottom half of my high school class. And in college, my grade point average was a C. On the United States scale, A, B, C is the lowest that's passing. My average was a C. I took 5 years to graduate college. When I did my doctorate, it took me 11 years to get my dissertation written. So if you have a time in this term when you are struggling and you feel ashamed and you think it reflects on you, there must be something wrong with you. No. A lot of people struggle. I am more than willing to help people who are struggling because I've been there. The one thing is, the first time you think you're struggling, speak up and tell me. One thing I had to learn the hard way. I've had a lot of professors over the years say, well, I wish I could help you. I wish you had asked earlier. So don't think if this gets much worse, then I'll ask for help. That first moment where you think, I might need help, ask then. And don't think it's just you, because a whole lot of people struggle. It's just when people are ashamed and won't talk about it, that's when the little struggles become the big collapses. A third misunderstanding. I think this one you've probably figured out is not true by now. But sometimes what people expect from their professors is that they will be very formal, they will be very authoritative. I have been told that it is common, not universal, but common for Japanese professors to be very formal, to dress very formally, address their students very formally. There probably are some counterexamples, but you may have picked up by now. What I want you to call me is my first name. Now I know that's not common here. What's more common is last name and san, last name and sensei. But in the United States, all my students call me by my first name. And this is an intercultural encounter. I'm teaching this the way I would teach an American college class. So I would like for you to treat it like an intercultural encounter and call me by my first name. If you get a good look at my shoes, you'll see they're Asics. I do a whole lot of walking, so I don't wear dress shoes. And you may notice as the term goes on, I think today this shirt is a reasonable thing to wear to work because I did not want to make you question my sanity on the first day of class. But one of my hobbies is that I shop for shirts on eBay. eBay is an auction site. You can find anything on eBay. And when you see some of the shirts that I wear to teach in, if nothing else, if my teaching can't keep you awake, the shirt might. In talking about professors being formal, something I decided to throw on here was a sociology professor at Alfred University named Larry Greil. And what he likes to do once a year is dress up as a Smurf. Now, I do not usually put paint all over myself, although years ago, a couple of students talked me into, what was it, Despicable Me, the cartoon with the bad guy they painted me up solid blue on Halloween, and I did Halloween as Despicable Me. Now, I'm told here in Japan, Halloween is a really big deal. You know, I have a Charlie Brown shirt. And if someone could draw the curl on my head. I've taught class as Charlie Brown before. All right. You might also then, knowing that I'm an American professor, expect that I am primarily interested in research. In the United States, there's a divide. Most college professors, most people who go on to get a doctorate, they are expected to do their own research, which they then publish. And they are evaluated, they are promoted based on how many other professors are referencing and citing their research. The University of Oregon in Eugene, all their faculty are evaluated by the quality of their research. I, on the other hand, I work at a small teaching college. And at teaching colleges, the emphasis is on make in the classroom a learning environment. At some of the large universities driven by research, what professors commonly do, they come in with a PowerPoint that's got bullet points, they read the bullet points, they make the PowerPoint available after class, they test on that. You may have noticed, my PowerPoints are mostly pictures. I also teach public speaking. PowerPoints with a lot of text on them are terrible. And that's not just me being a grumpy old man with opinions. John Sweller at the University of New South Wales is the person we can thank for cognitive load theory. And cognitive load theory says, when you give someone text to read and at the same time you read out loud to them, that's the worst possible condition for them to learn it. If you just let them read it to themselves, they'd do okay. If you didn't let them see it and you just talked, they'd do okay. But when you have them read it and at the same time you talk, retention is the lowest. Retention tends to be the highest when you give people pictures. And you associate your ideas with pictures and you point out things in the pictures. So, I am not from a research school, I'm from a teaching school. And here, just to take the edge off a little bit, I decided to show you some of my students back in the United States. This is the hardest class I teach. These 6 students, let's see, he's a communication minor, he's an interdisciplinary major, everybody else in this picture is a communication major. They are very proud of themselves. This was the last class meeting of communication theory, and they survived it. So we got a picture underneath a cherry blossom tree because we have one on our campus, and this was about 2 weeks after I found out I was coming to Japan for the year. These are my most recent graduates, and I am very proud of them. She is a first-year law student, and she is going to go into immigration law and set the world on its ear. She is very smart and a very hard worker. I like all of them, but she's impressive. And then I threw this in just because I like looking at it. A few years ago, we got some snow on campus, and they made a snowman of me. And you heard me say before, 93% of all communication is nonverbal is hogwash. To pick on me, they put a sign on the snowman that says 93% of communication is nonverbal. So those are my students. Second thing you should know about me. Right now, in the United States, and for the past 15 years, I've lived right there in Oregon. But I grew up, and I've mentioned this already, in Texas. Now, there may be some misunderstandings, some misconceptions you have about Texas, so let me tackle a few of them. When you hear Texas, you might think cowboys. You might think that I grew up wearing a cowboy hat and riding a horse. I have been on a horse when I was 7, 46 years ago, and I've never been on one again. You may also think because I'm from Texas, I spend all my time firing a gun. Or you might even just think that because I'm from the United States. I can tell you, I've held a gun once in my life because the person whose guest I was in his house, he just got a new rifle and he was proud of it. And he said, "Here, hold it." And I said, "Yes, that definitely is a rifle." And I handed it back. It's the only time I've ever held a gun. Something you should know about Texas is really, really big. It's almost twice the size of Japan. And so, there are parts of Texas that are what you have seen in the movies. Some parts of Texas, that's West Texas, it really does look like that. I've been through there in a car. But this is the city I grew up in. This is Dallas, Texas. From that height, not that different from Tokyo. Maybe fewer skyscrapers jammed in together. And the last time I lived in Texas was East Texas, and it looks like this. It's all pine forest. And if any of you know Beyonce's from Texas. So if the only thing Texas makes you think of is cowboys and guns, there's more to it. One thing you should know, because I promise not just to talk about the misconceptions, but to give you some of the truth. Texas and Hawaii are the two states out of all 50 that were once their own country. Hawaii was a kingdom. Texas was a republic. We had our own money. Because of that, Texans tend to think, in some ways I think Texas is to the United States as Japan is to the world. Because we're glad to be in the United States, we get along well with other people in the United States, but in some ways we stay separate. And where we stay separate, we think we're a little better. An example I can give you, across the United States, regions that span several states, the electricity is delivered in the form of a grid that doesn't stop at the state border. So California, Oregon, and Washington all neighbor each other. So if Oregon has big demand for electricity, some of the electricity will flow in from California and some from Washington. That's just how it works. Except Texas is not connected to the rest of the country. Their electric grid is cut at the border. Not perfectly at the border. There's some places where it overlaps a little, but most of Texas is cut off. Now, last year, February of 2021, they had an unexpected severe cold snap. And they had power outages across the state so severe that people's toilets were freezing. This got posted. Someone had a bottle of olive oil that froze solid. That's a very Texas mistake to make, to cut your electric grid off from the rest of the country. And let me add, they haven't fixed that problem. If they have another cold snap and more power outages, they're just going to do it again. That's a very Texas thing, being independent and thinking that you are very special and very unique. As for me specifically, I can tell you, people from Texas tend to be very direct. We tend to be, the word for it is we are blunt. We will say what we think. We sometimes hurt other people's feelings. The university I teach at in Oregon, I had been there 2 or 3 years when my boss had a meeting with me and said, "You're hurting people's feelings. You need to be more careful. You need to be more sensitive when you talk to other people." And this was in the United States. And now here I am in Japan. And I have kind of a history of being too blunt. So, when you talk to me about things related to the class, if it seems like I'm being very forceful, I'm being very hurtful, take some of that and discount it a little bit, that it's not you, it's me. Part of it is, that's how people from Texas talk. And that is where I'm from. And that's not a misconception, that's true. And my field is communication, and I can back it up. All right. The third thing that you should know about me. I've mentioned this a little in talking about the fact that I'm around small children a lot and the college I teach at. But I am a Christian. Now, what I am going to do is talk about that for a few minutes, and then at the end of my talk about Christianity, I am going to explain why it fits in the subject matter of the class for this day. Okay. The basic idea behind Christianity, everything has a creator. The creator created everything and everybody. The creator wants a relationship with each individual. The creator is perfect in knowledge, knows everything, perfect in power, can do anything, nothing the creator can't do, is perfect in love, always does the most loving thing, never makes a mistake, and is perfect in goodness. And those last two make a puzzle. The creator is perfect in goodness and therefore never tolerates any wrongdoing in his presence, not even the smallest wrongdoing. And all of us do things wrong. And a result of that is we can't be in the Creator's presence. But the Creator is perfect in love and wants a relationship with us. And therefore, took the consequences of our wrongdoing and gave it to us as a gift. And if we accept the gift, we are welcome in the Creator's presence. That's Christianity 101. If you come to the point where you accept the gift and you enter into a relationship, there's a lot more to learn from that point, which you can do some other place, some other time. But there are misconceptions. Let me talk about the misconceptions and clear them up. And then I am going to open the floor for questions one more time. And after that, I'm going to wrap up class. Misconception number 1. Our professor is a Christian. He therefore thinks he needs to do good things. Otherwise, God will get mad at him and send him to hell. If anyone ever describes Christianity that way, they don't understand it. You have parents, and I hope a good relationship with your parents. There are things you could do that would disappoint them deeply. My hope is you do what you do, and most of the time, if something you do would disappoint them, what makes you not do it is knowing it would cause them pain, not fear of them punishing you. Properly understood, that's Christianity. People in a relationship, they value the relationship and they treasure the person that they're in the relationship with. And so, anyone who thinks I do things because I'm afraid of hell doesn't understand it. Second misconception, I, because I am a Christian, am anti-science. Now, I have very, very good friends, colleagues, who are chemists, professors of chemistry, professors of biology, professors of math, professors of physics. And because my field is argumentation, my specialty is what kind of evidence is good evidence? What are the strong arguments against even things everybody accepts? And the friends of mine who are natural scientists, the colleagues of mine, they are Christians and they are natural scientists, and they don't see any conflict at all. Now, there are people who are skeptical of science. There are Christians who are skeptical of science. There are Christians who say they don't believe in science because it's unbiblical. There are Christians who say a lot of dumb things. That doesn't mean that's what the belief system dictates. This is Francis Collins. In the United States, he heads up the National Institutes of Health. He was one of the leading researchers in sequencing the human genome, and he's a devout Christian. And he doesn't see any conflict between his grasp of science and his faith. Okay, third misconception. I am the same as a member of the Unification Church. I'm not. I just got through talking about how I have friends and colleagues who are scientists. One of the things that drives them crazy is how much junk science there is out there. I gotta say, there's also a lot of junk religion. If anyone in here is associated with the Unification Church, what I'm saying may be one of my instances of being too blunt, maybe even being hurtful. I don't hate people who are associated with the Unification Church or the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons. I don't hate anybody belonging to any of those groups. But those groups, they say that they're Christian groups and they're not. And if you're interested in how I back that claim up, it's a talk we could have another time, not one we're going to have in here. Fourth misconception. I am different from you because I worship. One thing Christians do, Christians worship. But it's a misconception to say that that makes me different from you, because everybody, all human beings, worship. Atheists, possibly I have some atheists in here, atheists worship, if you understand what the word means. Everybody has different goals and activities in your life that are higher priorities or lower priorities. The one that's at the top, the very highest priority of all, that's what you worship. That's all the word means. I've known a lot of people in my life who have children, and the single most important thing in their life is doing what's right for their kids. They are worshiping their parenthood. I've known musicians who worship their career. I've known athletes who worship their sport. I've known people in college who worship making a lot of money. Everybody worships. What I do, I take my relationship with my Creator as I understand it, and everything else in my life that I do fits in as an expression of that. So I want to teach my classes in the way my faith has taught me. I do it with kindness and with integrity, and it becomes an expression of that. People who worship their career or worship parenting their kids, everything else in their life, they adjust to try to do what's best for their kids or to advance their career. That's all the word worship means. So yes, I do worship, and my worship is based on faith, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But you worship too. You worship something. Okay, fifth misconception. I'm different from you because I have faith. You might be able to see this one coming. Everybody has faith. Natural scientists have faith. If they use a piece of equipment that they did not invent, they are putting their faith in it. Faith is often confused with blind faith. I specialize in what's good evidence. What's good enough evidence to believe a claim? And I freely admit, if I ever talk about my faith, there comes a point where there are things I can't explain. But scientists will say that about their science as well. There are things we're still learning about. And what I always want to do is push back the limit of what I can explain and learn more and more, just like a scientist pursuing their academic field. Okay, sixth and final misconception. I am inflicting this entire talk on you because you're a captive audience and I want to convert all of you. Actually, I could get my Bible out and show you. I can't. And I have no interest in doing it. It's not possible. What my faith teaches me that I am to do is whenever I meet people who might misunderstand it, to address the misunderstanding so they understand it properly. That's my responsibility according to the teachings of the Bible, the sacred text, and it's also my responsibility as a professor. One of the reasons I bring this up, I don't ordinarily. I do not, when I teach my classes, ordinarily bring this up. But you get into the intercultural communication research, especially the research that explains the differences between Japanese culture and Western culture in general, and American culture in particular, and Christianity comes up again and again and again. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes on it right now. The single biggest difference in culture between the United States and Japan is individualism versus collectivism. Japan has a collectivist culture. The United States is a very individualist culture. In November 2019, Joseph Henrich and his collaborators, 2 biology professors and 2 economics professors at Harvard, published their study in Science magazine, one of the most rigorous peer-reviewed journals there is, with one of the highest rejection rates. Here was their claim in this study. They said the individualism-collectivism splits in the world came from Christianity. Because in the 5th century, it was the Roman Catholic Church that decreed you can't have multiple wives and you cannot marry your cousins. And they began enforcing that rule. And clans, extended family clans, which existed in Europe, broke apart. And the culture turned in the direction of you should think independently, you should question authority, you should trust strangers. But in Asia, where that decision was not enforced, because the Catholic Church had no authority, extended clans continued, and with them, collective culture. That's just one example. I could give you dozens more where in the research on intercultural communication, the biggest difference is Christianity in the West, and in the East, less influence of Christianity. So, I got up here and talked about my religious beliefs on the first day of a college class because my understanding of the student population and your goal is that you want to be effective in intercultural encounters. If you were taking this class to prepare to go do business in Saudi Arabia, and I were an Arabian professor and a practicing Muslim, and I said, you'll get tripped up by your misunderstandings of Islam, but I'll explain it to where you understand it. That's effectively what I'm doing. And I would encourage you, nobody's saying convert, but if you're from Japan, if you're from Asia, and you want to not trip over those weird things those Americans do, and a lot of Europeans as well, then understanding the roots of where their institutions came from, and the roots of where the ideas, the teachings about right and wrong came from, that will help to where the little details make sense up against the big picture. And you might come back at me, and I'm a debate coach, and I wouldn't mind if you did, and say, the number of people, especially in Europe, who profess Christianity is falling, and falling quickly, and the fall is speeding up. And you're right, that's all accurate. But it's still baked into their institutions. Culture changes very slowly. So are you going to come here every week, and I'm going to spout Bible verses and Bible stories at you? No. But there are some moments where the best explanation of what's happening comes out of the religious split. One of the articles that is an option for the article report is the difference in prayer postures between Christians and people of other faiths. And that's not in a religious journal. It's in a straight social science journal. So, in addition to explaining to you, I'm an American college professor, I'm a Texan, and you need to understand what that means and doesn't mean. You should know going in, if I from time to time bring up the influence of Christianity, it comes from the fact that I am one, but it also comes from the fact that you can't have an intercultural lesson that's really thorough without getting to one of the big roots of where cultures diverged. That was the point of that entire talk. Okay, what I promised I would do is I would, at the end, take another break, and in the break, see, are there things about the assignments in here or about how the class works that you want to ask me about? Yes?
Okay, if it's not about the classwork.
Please.
I didn't know what the people in the last picture were doing.
Okay, let me jump back. That's one of the things that is common with the Unification Church is they will have mass weddings. People getting married is a major part that the Unification Church teaches, that it's important that as many church members as possible get married. So they'll have a zillion people gather in a public place and have their weddings all at once. So that's a mass wedding. Okay. What other questions? Anything about how the class works? Yes, ma'am. Okay. You know what this is? The question was, I'm not confident with my English skill, may I record you? I'm already recording. This is a remote mic. It's recording to my phone. If you've been in Moodle, there's a link in there that says Lecture Recording Playlist. This is getting uploaded to YouTube. And each of these is a video that just has one slide all the way through, but it's a pretty clear recording. And they will be up typically within about an hour of the end of class. Now the question was, is it okay if you record? Sure. Because once in a while my equipment fails. And so if we lose a recording because my equipment didn't work and you recorded it, that's a good thing. But I will say, it's already